right, infrastructure admins, let's get right into it. Today's explainer is a laser-focused deep dive for your Nutanix NCP-MCI 7.5 certification, specifically covering Domain 10.10, Security Central and Approval Policies. If you're prepping for that exam, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to break down these concepts so you don't just memorize some facts, but actually understand the architecture under the hood. It's a lot of ground, but honestly, it's pretty fascinating stuff. Let's do this. Here's our quick roadmap for today. We're looking at why governance and security matter, then taking a peek inside NCM Security Central, followed by how we use approval policies for gatekeeping. We'll wrap up with the tricky exam traps and the key facts you absolutely need to memorize. So first up, why governance and security matter, or as I like to think of it, the IT administrator's shield and gate. To really nail this on the exam, think of these tools like a shield and a gate for your multi-cloud environment. Security Central? That's your shield. It's constantly scanning, protecting your perimeter, and checking internal configs. Approval policies, on the other hand, act as your gate. Nothing major gets through without proper authorization. Now, both of these are components of NCM, Nutanix Cloud Manager, which handles your unified cross-cloud operations. But here's the kicker, and you definitely want to remember this, administrative detail. NCM Security Central and Cost Governance aren't actually bundled in the standard NCM Unified Enablement. They're distinct operational powerhouses all on their own. Moving on to part 2, let's step inside NCM Security Central, your environment-wide shield. Okay, get ready for some acronyms, because the exam loves these. You need to know STIG and SCMA. STIG stands for Security Technical Implementation Guides. Think of these as the super rigorous rules heavily used by the U.S. Department of Defense that use machine-readable code to automate compliance. Then you have SCMA, which is the Security Configuration Management Automation. That's Nutanix's built-in engine. It continuously inspects your services to make sure nobody's deviating from those STIG policies. So just remember, STIG is the rulebook and SCMA is the relentless automated engine enforcing those rules. To put that into perspective, let's compare manual checks to Nutanix's SCMA. Why bother with automation here? Well, manual configuration checks just can't keep pace with enterprise-scale security demands. It's impossible. When you set up SCMA to enforce, say, RHEL 8 STIG rules, the system just takes over. It autonomously blocks direct root logins, locks non-root system accounts, and enforces some seriously strict password rules. You're completely removing human error and, let's be honest, admin fatigue from the equation, giving you this continuous, drift-free compliance. Now, this brings up a massive operational reality you have to commit to memory for the test. When you generate an open SCAP report to systematically prove your STIG compliance to an auditor, you run a specific script. But pay attention to the timeline. Depending on your environment size, generating that report is incredibly resource-heavy and will take about 60 to 90 minutes. I mean, that's a solid chunk of time. Lock that 60 to 90-minute window into your brain because it is highly testable and totally impacts real-world operational planning. All right, on to part 3, gatekeeping with approval policies, your governance checkpoints. So if you're going to build a gate, you need a serious engine to power it, right? Enter the policy engine. This is a single VM setup living directly inside Prism Central. And here's the absolute non-negotiable fact. You must enable this policy engine in Prism Central if you want to use approval policies. Period. Besides being the gatekeeper, this engine also enforces your resource quotas and orchestrates apps through VPC or virtual private cloud tunnels. It is literally the heartbeat of your internal governance framework. Let's look at another concrete example to see why this matters. Picture a user trying to deploy a massive, resource-hungry NCM store app. If it's an unmanaged deployment, anybody with basic access could just spin it up and accidentally drain a huge chunk of your cluster's compute and storage. Not great. But if you have a policy engine managed deployment, it completely flips the script. It acts as a strict governance gate, forcing a sequenced IT review. Basically, before that heavy app can even launch, IT admins or project leads have to review the request, check the business justification, and explicitly hit approve. Actually, setting up this gate in the self-service interface is super logical and sequential. First, you lay down the basic info. You name the policy, assign it to a project, and pick the entity. Like, is it an application or a runbook? And choose the specific action that triggers the gate. Step 2, you set your conditions. You pick an attribute, toss in an operator like contains or equals, and set a target value. And finally, step 3, you select your approvers, which, by the way, have to be set up sequentially. When you're looking at the actual self-service UI, the precision required is pretty impressive. You're pinpointing the exact entity type, again like an app or a runbook, and the precise action, whether that's an initial deployment or some day 2 operation. Then, in those condition settings, you're mapping out the exact attribute, operator, and value. That intricate mapping is exactly how you tell the policy engine, hey, when this specific thing happens, stop and wait for a human to review it before moving forward. Moving to Section 4. This is crucial, exam traps and edge cases for the NCP-MCI 7.5. Okay, listen up, because test writers absolutely love these little administrative nuances. First trap, you can only create exactly one approval policy for protecting snapshots. Just one. And here is the real kicker. Once you create that snapshot approval policy, it cannot be deleted. Literally no way to delete it. Do not miss that on the exam. Also, remember how I said approvers are sequential? If you have multiple sets of approvers, set 1 must approve it before set 2 even gets a notification. Oh, and speaking of notifications, SMTP email absolutely must be configured in Prism Central, otherwise the whole notification chain just falls apart. And finally, don't try to use some random external email address. Approvers have to be existing authenticated users right there in Prism Central. All right, final section. Key facts to memorize, our high-yield review. This is a great spot to pause and mentally bookmark these 4 parameters because they are gold. Number 1, STIG reports take 60 to 90 minutes to run via OpenSCAP. Number 2, when an approval request gets generated, the default expiration time is exactly 30 days. After that, it times out. Number 3, while you totally have the power to tweak the SDMA schedule, the underlying AIDS schedule, that is locked to a fixed weekly interval. You can't change it. And lastly, the policy engine is the absolute mandatory prerequisite for enforcing resource quotas and your approval policies. No engine, no governance. And that wraps up our deep dive into Security Central and approval policies. As you keep grinding away on your NCP-MCI 7.5 prep, I want to leave you with a thought. Based on that automated SCMA framework and the 60 to 90-minute OpenSCAP reporting we just talked about, how are you going to apply these exact principles to audit and govern your own clusters tomorrow? Keep that real-world application in the back of your mind, watch out for those edge cases, and you're going to totally crush this exam. Thanks for hanging out and learning with me today.